Hi everybody, Colin Stevenson here, joined by my hero, John Lenhart. Hi John.
Hi.
You know, people must get rid of me, getting sick of me saying that every time we do a video. I like it. So, today we are on the second parenting video, and it's how to deal with your child behaviour. We see it daily, whether you're in the supermarket, whether it's on the television, online. My kid does this, my kid won't stop doing this. Or then you see, the kid acting out, and then the parent not understanding and going against the kid's intangible driver, which causes the kid to be even worse. So today, John, you're going to take us through maybe some tips or some understanding to allow parents to see their child maybe for who they are, as opposed to what they feel that they should tell them.
Exactly. So remember, this is the second part. The first part of the video, we talked in that video about how a parent's job is to teach their child how to think. We're humans. Man comes from Sanskrit, manu, meaning to think. A bird teaches their young to fly. We ought to teach our young to think. So if you need to watch that first video, that's great. But that's the whole gist of what we're talking about here, is teach them how to think. The important thing to realize about behavior is that humans physiologically sync their thought processes. And that's the little secret to dealing with your child's behavior.
Yeah.
If your thought process is in what we call a 160, where you're distracted, or a 320, where you're upset, your child is going to move their thought process to that position. And I want to give you a quick story about this. I went to have an observation in a school. There was a third grade child with Down syndrome, and he's autistic. So he cannot control his thought process. And what happens is I watched this child be cared for essentially all day long through school by different teachers who were supposed to either do tasks with him or take him certain spots. And it was just really interesting because they said there's this one teacher that he just loves. And he spends the majority of his day with this teacher. Well, this teacher was at 80, was focused the entire time. And he was focused. He was great. And then there was this moment where the teacher brought him into this room where there was another teacher, and she's doing her thing. And all of a sudden, the teacher who's with this student looked outside and went, while she was talking, this other teacher went, "Oh, is that a so-and-so car?" And the kid hit her on the shoulder. The other teacher was like, "Don't attack him, or don't attack her." And I'm like, wait a minute. It wasn't, it was just all he did was this on his shoulder. And they wanted to see that as he was attacking her. But what he was really doing was his thought process was going down to 160. His thought process was getting distracted. He wants to be focused. He's unable to hold his own thought process at this age and in his condition. He likes being focused. We all do. What happened was the teacher got distracted and went to 160. He felt it and went down, and he knew, wake up, focus. He did that. She focused. He smiled. He hit her and smiled. And so I was trying to explain to these teachers, the kid is physiologically syncing, but this happens with all your students. Do you realize as a teacher, if you are teaching the best information in the world and you're in a distracted or a triggered process, your kids won't learn a thing. So the number one thing I want parents to realize is be aware of where is your thought process when you go to approach your child. Because if you're starting at a distracted or a triggered place, good luck. That's the reason your kid isn't doing what they're doing. So if you're distracted or triggered and you're trying to get them to do something at 80, because all behavior is 80. When you're trying to teach a kid's behavior, you're trying to get them focused in their conscious brain. We call that 80. You're trying to get them there. If you're not there, There's no way that kid is going to get there. And then you're actually going to trigger, make them worse. And then you're going to blame them for being a spoiled brat when the reality is it all started with you.
100%. Now, I want to take this opportunity and talk about parents with their mobile phones. Just quickly, because I understand that you've got a few subjects to go through. Parents with their mobile phones are not focused on their child. They're not focused on their behaviour, how to teach them, how to talk to them, how to learn, how to interact. They are so far away from that child. So if that child is now bored, right, they might not hit them. They might go and do something in the house. And then that parent then puts their phone down. They've seen the effect of not giving the child their attention, and the child does something either destructive or, naughty, which causes then the parent to lash out at the child. Then the child flips out. The parent then looks at them and starts going, well, you're spoiled, get to your room, get to your bed, no dessert for you, whatever it's going to be. And all that child wanted was a bit of attention. And that was how they got it, by going and misbehaving in some sort of way.
The child wants to connect.
Yes.
That's the attention they're looking for. The parent, when they're on the phone, that 160 distracted habitual behavior, 94% of people are walking around at this 160 habitual behavior. When you're on the phone or you're on the computer, you are at a habitual state. That's, we like to say, a zombie state. That's why people are on the phone and then all of a sudden you talk to them and they're like, what? That's the 80 state. I've said this, and we talked about this in a previous video. I've said to a classroom of high school students, if being on your phone made you happy and focused, your teachers would make you go on your phone for 10 minutes before every class. Yeah. Because if that caused you to smile and focus and understand and be interacting and engaging, we'd all want you to be on your phone. Your phone does not do that. So in your example, the parent took themselves to 160 habitual behavior. The kid was that external event that triggered the parent, and now the parent's at 320 in the triggered moment, and it's setting the kid off. And that's where parents think, no, I was focused. I was talking to this person. You're in a habitual state. You are not in a state where you're interacting, especially not towards your child, because you're over here on the phone. So that's what we're talking about, is you're aware of it. And you're bringing this up, so I'll bring this up. It's more than just yourself. We have this course, Instant Impact, that help these people get themselves to a spot where they flow, which if you're in flow, your kid's going to be in flow. The number one thing that will improve your child's behavior is your interaction with your significant other. If you are in flow with your significant other, your child will want to sink into that, and you're not going to have these issues. I can't tell you the number of parents who have told me it's like a magic trick. The minute I started getting along with my spouse and flowing with them, all of a sudden our kids started behaving. Well, what's happening? You're not getting along with your spouse, so your kids are not behaving. So you and your spouse are dealing with the kids not behaving, which causes you not to get along even more. And then everything's out of control. The dissolve in your kids' behavior is fixing your behavior and your interaction with your significant other. So there's another big tip for your kids' behavior, because your kid's going to sink into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, a kid's brain is still developing. And when it comes to the words and it comes to the behaviors, they're not too sure of it. But what they get from when they are born, the minute they pop out, they understand energy, because it's a silent way, it's a silent language, and they know. So if they say this in the house, if they see their parents or their guardians or whatever, having this kind of negative or bad energy, between each other, they will pick up on that and think that is normal, and they will habituate towards that because they're looking for the interaction, and they think, well, I am going to behave like you two so that you give me some attention, and people don't realize that when a child is acting out, it's because they're bored, or as we just spoke about, they're bored, or they're not being given the attention that they need. Children are like puppies, and it's the same thing. If you tell a puppy to go and lie down, and you don't give it that playtime, you don't give it that exciting, and you don't talk to it in a nice voice, and you don't give it that, it's almost like you've got to exhort onto the child and the dog so that they know the engagement's there, because you don't know their intangible drivers yet because they're so young. So what you do is you exhort, and all they do is they just see you engaging. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you engage until they get older. And this is where the behavior starts to change.
Right. So that connection is so important, what you're talking about. I want to go through, there's only 4 approaches to changing behavior because there's 4 thought processes.
Yep.
And let's look at the connection in each. So the 320 approach is intimidation. Do this because I said so. Or and you rush at the kid, you threaten the kid. It's just intimidation. You're treating the kid like they're an inanimate object. And that's the 320 approach. The 160 approach is the reward or punishment. And so what happens is you basically say, and I like to use the example of this kid, like taking this chair and rocking it or kicking it or jumping on it. So what happens is you say, hey, if you keep doing that, I'm going to give you a spanking. So now a spanking, and a lot of people go, well, they did something wrong and they know the consequences, they got a spanking. 4 years ago, there were the results of a 50-year spanking study. So more than 50 years ago, they started following a group of people, kids essentially, who were getting spanked and who weren't getting spanked. And they followed them for 50 years, followed their kids, followed everything. At the end of the 50-year spanking study, they found 3 results from it. Number 1, people who got spanked are more likely to participate in physical abuse and to be physically abused.
Yep.
Number 2, people who were spanked or grew up getting spanked had a worse thought process. Again, it's dragging them down to this 160. Number 3, people who are spanked are more likely to end up in prison. Now, why would that be? Well, the way I like to explain this is because the issue with spanking is it is an animal or 160 approach. It's how you train an animal. And the way you train an animal is there's this window. So what has to happen, if you want your animal trained and you don't want to do it yourself, you give it to somebody else, what they do is they sit there, and the moment the animal does the behavior, they reward or punish them, and they say a certain word. So if you wanted to teach your dog to shake its paw, you'd sit in front of it and you'd wait for it to raise its hand. And the moment it raises its hand, you put your hand underneath it, you'd say shake, and you give it a treat. And what you're trying to do is wire together in the brain the animal raising the paw, the animal hearing the word shake, and the animal getting a treat. If you do that within a 3 to 5 second window and you do it every single time, at some point you can say shake and the animal's brain fills in the paw and looks for the treat. So there's a lot of people raising their kids this way. This is animal training. The problem with it is, and especially with spanking is if you don't spank that kid within 3 to 5 seconds every time they do the behavior, you're hurting them. And here's the example. This boy pulls this girl's hair every day at school for 3 weeks. And on the 15th day, he gets caught, he gets sent to the principal, and he gets a spanking. Why does he think he got a spanking?
Because he got caught.
Because he got caught. He pulled her hair 14 times and didn't get a spanking. Now, what's his brain going to work on doing?
Not getting caught.
That is the definition of the criminal mentality.
Yeah.
So anybody, coaches, parents, leaders in organizations, anyone who uses reward or punishment to change behavior, they have to do it 3 to 5 seconds after the behavior, and they have to do it every single time, or they are creating a criminal mentality.
And what they're doing as well is they're having repeat offenders. They're actually encouraging. So if we go to somebody commits a crime and they go through the whole court process, 6 months later they're then tried and they're put into jail, they're more likely to come back out of jail and do it because they're just gutted that they get caught, but they'll find a better way to go and commit the same crime or commit the same deed, whatever it is. And people don't realise that the reward of punishment method, as much as it's been used since the beginning of our time that we know, it's never going to help anything.
Right. And then why are they spanking? So if the parent is at 160 or 320 when they spank their kid, they're putting their kid in that spot and they're not spanking them logically in a sense. So what's the third approach at 80 is logic. So you could tell the kid, don't stand on that chair. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to appeal to that kid logically. Stop standing on that chair. What you said though is that, and you've said this before, is that when we say don't, the brain's 3 times more likely to do it. So what you're really doing is telling that kid to stand on that chair because they don't have an option of what to do. Yeah. And we've also from our stories have learned that your brain fills in the story. So the kid will jump up on the chair because the first part of the story, the character, has been, you in that chair has been introduced, but why shouldn't I stand on that chair and what will happen? The kid fills in the story. Oh, you don't think I can stand on it? You'll be amazed when I do. And they stand on the chair. So the problem with logically appealing to the kids is, does that work for you? I love to ask parents. So if I logically tell you the right way to eat and the right way to exercise, will your behavior change it right now? Then why do you think that's going to work for the kid? Because you think the kid is a robot.
Yep.
Worse, and this is the key thing, is if you're going to be logical with the kid, there's a concept I like to explain to people: laws versus principles.
Yep.
Every law is a don't, and it offers a punishment. Every principle is a do, and it offers a reward. There are no laws. Our government doesn't have any laws that if you do them, you get something.
Yep.
Every law is, if you don't do this, then you get this punishment. So when the kid doesn't stand on the chair, you say, don't stand on the chair. So they get off the chair. Let's say they logically listen to you and they start kicking the chair. Don't kick the chair. They start rocking it. Don't rock in the chair. Well, how many laws is it going to take to get the behavior you want? I love to say to people, do you think you could get me to arrive at your house by only giving me directions on what not to do?
Yep.
You can't do it. Our government works on this basis of don'ts. And that's why we have so many lawyers, and we're just going to have more and more laws over time. So the onus is on you, the parent. If you start talking that kid as a don't, and if you start talking laws, so when I watch parents, if the parent is a don't and a law machine, they're exhausted. There's no way they're at 80. They're at 160 because they're so, I've got to, how many more don'ts do I have to give this kid? What about a principle? Take care of the chair. Yeah. I've said this to my kids. There was a couch they were abusing, a $4,000 couch. And I, rather than tell them not to jump on the couch, I said, take care of the couch. And the answer, and the reason was because, if we have to buy a new couch, we're not going to Disney World this year. Yeah. There's the $4,000. Take care of the couch. Now, whose responsibility is it to figure out how to take care of that couch?
It's theirs, because
theirs.
I told them not.
It's not on me anymore. And all I have to do is, whatever they do, all I have to do is say, are you taking care of the couch? So now look at how I went from a law to a principle, and I put the onus on the kid instead of the onus on me. And I'm allowing them to be unique, which is really the ultimate way to change behavior.
Yes.
Is, do you know your child's uniqueness, and can you talk to them in that uniqueness so they feel connected, and they're not going to, and you'll be at 80, they'll not be all over the place. They'll feel connected. And then we talked about this unconscious confrontations. The most humane way to change anybody's behavior is to use an unconscious confrontation. to change their behavior.
Yeah, and I found that when you're talking about the don't do this and don't do that, my mother was on her own with 5 boys. Now, she was on her own for well over a decade with 5 boys on her own. And it was Colin, don't do this, Matthew, don't do that, Darren, don't do that. And then while we then change the behaviours, just like you said, we go from standing on it to kicking it, it was constant, constant, constant. So the house was full of don'ts, right? And we never, don't get me wrong, we did listen to a degree, but then when it get too much, and then if the voices get raised, and then that was it, there was no control at all, because there's 5 different personalities, 5 different intangible drivers, 5 different ages, so it was like some are learning at this stage and this stage. So they see me, the eldest, kind of flipping out, and then the youngest starts going, and it's like, I'm just doing what they're doing because I'm learning from them. So it was a very, very difficult time for my mum. And now I understand why she's pure white at such a young age.
Right. So she's you're all sinking into each other. And Jonathan and I are going to talk about how a person can get a group like that, unruly people, in sync. And we'll address that. So I want to talk about one of the subtle points about behavioral change is that if I stand up in front of a classroom and I hold up a candy bar and I say, whoever can tell me the capital of this state gets this candy bar, I'm actually putting their brain at 160 or animal.
Yeah.
However, if I ask somebody the capital and they answer it, and then I toss them a candy bar, I actually put them at 80, because what I'm doing is I'm trying to help them have a good emotion to them having already gotten the question right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people raising animals and thinking they're raising humans, but how they approach the reward actually puts them in animal. There's a lot of employers who are treating their employees like animals and maybe don't realize it and don't want to. So those are some of the key tricks to do that. When would I want to offer a reward ahead of time? When the person does your and my favorite topic, Colin, when a person loves.
Yeah.
So what I'll say to a parent is, you can tell your kid, anytime you give to somebody else without expecting anything in return, I will give to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can do that because it's very tough, but you want to teach your kids to love. You want to teach your kids to give and not expect anything in return from that person. And then you can give them over here. I tell this to the teachers all the time. There is a point when you can offer reward, and it's when you see the students helping each other. I taught a teacher that recently, and she said, John, now my kids are helping each other like crazy. I don't know if I have enough rewards to go around. Oh, isn't that a tragedy? You have a classroom full of kids actually love and help each other. Then what we do is teach the kids to make sure the other kid asks for help before you push that help on them. But that isn't a case, because notice the kid is still, it's tough to love. It's tough to learn how to love because you're giving and you're not seeing anything come back. And you want to take, you want to reinforce that behavior. And that is really the only time you want to offer a reward ahead of time, ahead of the behavior.
Yeah, I totally feel that. And I like to say to parents as well, if they have an animal in the house, and I know it's very Western world like, but you don't get anything back from the animal. And when you learn to love an animal, so my little one's got the dog, the dogs, I love the dog, and it's a selfless thing. You clean it, you feed it, you do all the things, but you don't get anything back. People say, well, you get unconditional love, but you need to give the unconditional love for the dog to be there, so it's not so much, it doesn't do it in a way where it takes your problems away, or so you don't really gain much. But I find with a child having an animal in the house now, obviously what type of animal will depend on the situation of the home. I'm not saying everyone has to go and get a dog, but if they have an animal and something just to love, and that is it, and have fun with, they then learn that through friendship, family, these type of things. We were always taught, we were brought up with dogs from a very, very young age. And I can remember, I think I was 4 3 or 4. My mum got a large German Shepherd, and he was just a cracking big dog. And we just arms round him, we just loved him, and we're all kind of lying on top of him, and it was great. And I do feel that this is definitely another plus to be able to get to that point of love.
Yeah, we could go down. I'll just say this and then I'll wrap it up the other way. But what you're doing with a pet is you're really training your unconscious brain. When you love that pet, your unconscious brain, we've covered this already, will give you pleasure chemicals.
Yeah.
That's why when you see a kid abusing an animal, you really want to step into that, and they're going to need help, because what they're doing is they're training their unconscious brain. And we talked about conscience. They could be flipping their conscience to get energy from being cruel and what they're doing to their unconscious. So it's really to understand what pets are doing to people. We'll have to talk about this in a whole nother episode, but it's really this reflexive nature and your unconscious brain and what you're teaching. So there's a big benefit to that, but there's a reason why you'd almost want to train these kids how to approach these animals and everything, because it's really affecting them. Yeah. So the way I want to wrap this up is when I look at parents, I like to say, are you raising children or are you raising adults?
Yeah.
And it really kind of blows the parent away to think about that. I'm not saying that you're trying to take your child and treat them like an adult. I'm saying, are you seeing that child as them eventually becoming an adult? Because if your first shot is just to spank them because it's easy for you, you're denying them this step of logic.
Yep.
You really want them to learn. What I like to tell parents is I like to approach the kid first logically. Yep. Don't do that because this will hurt you, or try to take care of that. And then, especially when they're real young, and if they don't respond to that, then they need a spanking, not in anger, to help them realize, okay, I get it. Yeah. At some point, they're not going to need the spanking. But if the parent just defaults to spanking, then the parent goes, well, they don't listen. And I always go, when's the last time you asked them logically to stop that? So this is a progression. I'm talking about really young kids. There's a certain age where they're not able to handle the logic. Then there's a certain age where they do, and you want to make that transition with the kid. But at that point, you really should be able to learn their uniqueness and help them into that. Well, what are you really trying to do? The goal for every adult is the conjunctive of resiliency and growing and handling tension. So resiliency, we talked about this, is the ability to get yourself to 80 focused and stay there despite your surroundings want to take you down, because you're going to physiologically sink. So you use to your advantage the kid's ability to physiologically sink. You get yourself right, they sync up to you. And then at some point you want to teach them, look, you should be able to be at 80 even when daddy isn't. And in fact, when daddy's at 160, can you come over and help me back up to 80? And don't let me take you down. That's resiliency. Growing and handling tension. We've talked about this. I can't handle this much tension, but have I handled this much more tension this week than I did last week? And I ask that to the kids all the time. Are you helping your kids handle safely this much more tension they did last week? And that gets to confrontations. Are you helping your child handle confrontations? Are you helping them grow in handling confrontations? When people sit there and go, you know what, people can handle a confrontation. That's too bad. We need to grow in our ability to handle tension. We need to handle confrontations. Ultimately, what I want every child to learn, and they should spend their school years learning, is how they uniquely learn, which includes how they uniquely motivate themselves. So if you were truly raising adults, your goal is, do your kids know how they uniquely learn so they can do that on purpose? And do your kids know how they uniquely motivate themselves so they don't have to wait for other people, they can be motivated? If you've done that for your child, you've raised an adult, an excellent member of society, and they're going to be successful regardless of what job they have.
Absolutely. And just before we go, can I just ask you, people will be watching this video and they will be wanting to know, how old can their child be, or what do you think the optimum age to start doing the intangible drivers test with them is?
Some of these, it's funny with perceivers. I've been reading some books, and there's some doctors who say there's some kids that come right out and they're just in a like perceiver. Okay. So some of these I think you'll notice right away, but at 4 is that's when we tell the parent, okay, you can pretty much get a vibe of what your child's uniqueness is at 4. You may be able to do it sooner, but certainly at 4 and after, you can start trying these different approaches to see which ones work and which ones don't. That's the importance of the tangible drivers. And what Dr. Harper was talking about is words for this. There is an objective measure. If you understand this, then you know what you're trying to say and do to approach your child, versus if you don't have this framework, then it's just kind of random. Once you get the framework, you'll understand a lot of different ways to approach them. So I usually say about 4 is when you're going to start being able to really connect with that uniqueness on purpose.
That makes sense, because the brain's starting to switch on. Good. Well, I hope people manage to get some tips for this, and they understand how to take a different approach. Will have a better child, but it'll also allow them to be a better parent as well. And this is inevitably what we're looking for. So thank you. And I will see you next week. Take care.
Bye.